Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Steven Universe Revisit, or Alex and Panda Revisit Steven Universe. I'm Trans Panda, currently fronting Donna, the fictive from Resident Evil, and this is Alex.
Hello, everyone.
And today's episode is Season 1, Episode 16, Steven the Sword Fighter. I wrote it as Steven the Sword Filter in my notes for some reason. I guess I was rushing.
It's okay.
But yes, so today's episode focused on Steven watching one of those old-timey schlocky samurai movies where they're doing ridiculous moves and all that kind of deal. And during the process, Pearl complains that it's not like real sword fighting like she's experienced and trained in. Because of this, Stephen is interested to see a real demonstration of sword fighting, which Pearl quickly agrees to. Hmm. This leads them to a, as of yet unspecified arena. I don't believe we got a name, but it appears to be a gem arena of sorts in the sky, where Pearl decides to sword fight with a projection that she projects from her gem, which seems to be on an automated process to just sword fight and not much else. Pearl manages to beat the hologram after one and agrees to help Steven learn from it afterwards to put it on basic level 1. Steven, wanting to do cool samurai tricks, distracts Pearl for a moment, and that unfortunately leads the projection Pearl to incidentally stab Pearl through the chest. And in that moment, Pearl tries to reassure that she'll be okay before she very quickly seems to quickly poof out of existence. Her body just suddenly poof explodes and her gem falls to the
Her
ground.
projection gets disturbed, which makes her retreat back into her gem like a little turtle.
Yes, this is the first time we've seen any of the crystal gems have that happen to them, though we have seen a lot of the monsters that they've fought have that happen to them, which is interesting.
Yes, this means something. Ooh!
Ooh,
I should also mention that the samurai movies that are being referenced here are like a reference to like Japan's to this very specific era of Japanese history before the era that swords were outlawed and banned. There was a time in Japanese cinema where that period of history was being romanticized, which is also what several shonen manga series are about.
I did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't remember the era names off the top of my head, and I'm not going to say them um, because I don't want to get them wrong. I believe it's the Edo or Edo period, but
Uh, but yeah, so uh, from that moment in the show, Amethyst and Garnet reassure Steven that she's going to be okay and that this is something that gems like them just can do from time to time. And then Steven goes, "Oh, that's great. So when's she going to come back out? A couple minutes?" And then it hard cuts to 2 weeks later. Apparently, Pearl has been taking her time regenerating her gem, where Amethyst even comments on the fact that she's taking a while, much longer than usual. Um, the house is a bit in disarray as a result, and Stephen, trying to cope with the fact that Pearl hasn't been around for 2 weeks, starts hanging around with the hologram Pearl, which has just been underneath a sheet for the past 2 weeks, I guess. This goes predictably poorly because it is nothing more than an AI, and not even in the fun system alter way kind, where all it really knows how to do is train uh, new sword fighting recruits. Really poorly, if I must say, but it probably makes sense if you're a gem and can regenerate. Not very good for humans, I would imagine. Um,
Oh, okay, so I do actually believe that the period of Japanese history being referenced in that movie is the Edo period, and the kind of film they were watching is called a Jidaigeki, literally
oh,
meaning period dramas. Before the and it takes place before the Meiji Restoration of 1868.
oh, well, that's very interesting, actually. Thank you for providing real historical facts, Alex. Something that I was expecting us to never do on this show. Oh, that's very interesting. Uh, right. So Stephen is hanging out with Pearl, Hollow Pearl. It predictably goes poorly because all it knows is to do is to fight and stab things and parry thrust. Uh, and this comes to a head where Stephen just tries watching the sequel to the I cannot recall the name of the film at the moment. I should have written it down, but
It's
it's
one of
this.
those Edo period Japanese samurai films.
Oh yes, it's
One of those Jidaigeki.
yeah. I believe it's the fifth movie in the franchise, so apparently it's been
It
going
is the
on for
fifth,
a
yeah.
while. And because Hollow Pearl sees a sword, she stabs the TV and destroys it, leading Steven to lash out, causing a fight scene to happen between the two of them, where Steven says that he should have been patient waiting for Pearl, and finally notices an opening in Hologram Pearl's attacks and attacks with a mop, leading the hologram Pearl to finally be defeated. And at that moment, uh, Pearl basically regenerates into a new form and a slightly different design, which feels a bit more sleek and easier to animate.
That's probably why they did it.
Very true. And the episode basically ends there, where Pearl catches up on what everyone's been doing, which has mostly been nothing. Uh, so that's the episode, and we told Alex this while we were watching, but honestly, I feel that this is the first episode that feels like uh Steven Universe hitting the stride that I recall. It feels like what defines Steven Universe here. And it might be in part because the animation quality kind of feels like it jumped up a bit in this episode. Would you say that, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also might be because this is one of the few times that it's been almost singularly gem focused related, and the plots that can happen with the gems, like in this episode, I tend to prefer. But and this is probably the first real one we see exploring the nature and history of how gems work and operate in this world. And I am interested in the sense that they basically are light projections that retreat back into their physical forms when taking too much grievous damage. You can see how they've been around for a while and how they've managed to survive any sort of mistakes like that. Also,
Also, when Pearl like comes back, you can actually see like little cameos of all of her previous forms, which we will be seeing as this series continues.
and one we won't be seeing because I believe one of them was the design she had in the pilot.
Yes.
Yes, and that's a fun little Easter egg to do. Um, One thing I'm going to say, this is going to sound totally and completely out of left field, Alex, but it's funny how Xenoblade Chronicles 2 completely ripped off the gem system from Steven Universe.
Oh,
Did you
interesting.
know
Yeah, I
that's how
don't
that?
get that at all.
So it's basically exactly how it works in. in Steven Universe and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where all like half the cast are actually their actual physical bodies are these gemstones, and their bodies project outwards, like in light-based format, and they retreat back to their gems and rocks when they're not needed.
Interesting.
That is how Xenoblade Chronicles 2 works, and the less we talk about that game, the better. Uh,
Yeah, I've heard a lot of unkind things about Xenoblade Chronicles, so yeah.
a weirdly positive plural depiction until the end, and that's all we're going to say about it. But to
Uh-oh.
to put it, this is at least going to help emphasize how the crystal gems physically work. Uh, is quite popular. And probably influenced a lot of creatives in the field, because this is one of the strengths of Steven Universe, is the biology and anatomy of the crystal gems, I'd say. Um, Another thing I'd like to say is that I think this is the first real time we've had a notable title screen difference. If you noticed with the rain,
Yes, it was raining,
it was
and it did fit the mood of the episode because the episode was set. The entire episode was very darkly lit. Like the lighting is some of the most unique we've had in the series so far.
yes, I believe it often had like secondary shading applied to the characters with like shadows and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's instead of the usual flat colors that we see in the more daytime episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else I can think of? Actually, we kind of went over most of my notes. I guess we could talk about. This was mostly a waiting game, which definitely goes to it. It is interesting the bit that Amethyst and Garnet were going on in the background, which is, I don't know how else to put this, but Amethyst inflation moments. Uh, and that was kind of their ongoing gag, is that Garnet just had to be an unwanted babysitter for Amethyst because she was just now slightly airborne. And I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that joke, because we've already been seeing like some elements that Amethyst keeps kind of getting the butt of the joke in a not overt but vaguely fat phobic way, but we'll just have to see how it keeps going as the series goes on.
Well, since y'all brought it up, do you want to very just lightly mention it then?
Uh, what part of my what part of my mentioning? Are we talking about giant women?
The implication.
Uh, I don't think we're going to go into detail about it in this podcast, but
Yeah, we do not want to get into explicit detail.
because at the end of the day, because of the inherent obfuscation of how this works, it would be mostly presumptuous on our parts, from what I can tell. But there is a tendency.
Uh, hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
you may know more than we do, because we didn't exactly keep up with the Crooniverse as much as we could. That's in reference to other things, but
Here's what I'm going to say. If you
okay.
were around the fandom at the time, the crew were basically the crew basically participated in the fandom. They would take time to talk with fans. They would engage in fan activities. They pretty much treated Tumblr like their home when the show was active.
Honestly,
And
the
we
last
think that this was a gigantic mistake because they gave us a lot more information than we knew what to do with, and some of the things they said hinted towards the nature of the show's production being a lot more troubled than all of us suspected at the time. So here's the thing, because of the crew's communication on Tumblr, from what we heard, they were willing to put how should I say this? The crew were open about the loose nature of sexual exploration in the show. But the sexual exploration in the show is kept vague enough to where it's not overtly there, but you just have to be looking for it. And the very, very inklings of it really start showing up in Giant Woman, the very appropriately named Giant Woman. Because if you're in very niche circles, you will find people with that interest. Same with this amethyst inflation bit. If you know where to look, you will find people with those niche interests.
Don't look too hard at me now. Anyway.
I don't mind.
Okay, but it is interesting. I do tend to get weirded out sometimes by like certain element. There is a history of like people in charge of animation sometimes slipping in sexually charged elements into works primarily intended for children. And
It's a pretty well-known thing in
it's
animation
a pretty,
communities.
yes, it's a quite well-known phenomenon. I'm going to say so far this has been on the much lower end of the spectrum. So it's why I was hesitant to say anything about it, because it's I feel more about its usage in the episode than where it exactly is say because it's like you said, it's so incredibly vague, and it feels more like
Well,
it was.
that was the point. You can't put like explicit material in a show aimed at families. So you either have to be very, very overt, very, very covert, or you can do what the rescuers did and just put in naked women in one frame that people aren't going to notice on their crappy VHS transfers of the movie that gets edited out into high definition releases.
Yeah, well, oh, yeah. I don't really have much to say about the topic, and this is probably the only time we're going to bring this up because the only. Yeah, no, that it could mean something.
Actually, this will come up in the future.
Oh,
It's some of these episodes, this phenomenon is going to be basically unavoidable.
oh, I see. Well, it will be interesting to get to it when it happens. But it has been funny that the actual giant woman in our system wasn't present for the giant woman episode, unfortunately.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was actually expecting Helen to show up, and she did, and I was all like, ah, missed opportunity.
don't worry, show up for the next one.
All right.
Well, now what's really a missed opportunity is I'm usually a nonverbal alter, which is why I've been struggling to speak a little this episode. So I wasn't there for the nonverbal episode with Onion as well.
Oh my goodness, that episode. I mean, we just talked about it like 2 days ago, but goodness gracious.
Yeah, well, at least I could say that I did genuinely like this episode, and I do feel that it is the start of the Steven Universe vibe that I think everyone fell in love with
Yeah,
online.
yeah, I think that's a very
Imp-
astute observation.
yes, and that's
Okay,
a very
my
important milestone for the show, I'd say. Anything else at you, Alex?
Okay, my notes are Pearl swordsmanship, which y'all talked about. Garnet spectating.
Oh,
It's
yes.
interesting because Garnet, usually we don't really get much from her, but this episode does like establish that she seems to really enjoy watching people fight. She seems to really enjoy spectating sports, which makes me think she would be a great sports anchor if she was interested in ever becoming one.
Hmm.
Uh, First projection disturbance, we already talked about that. Pearl taking her time, already talked about that. Oh, wait a second. Did we talk about Pearl taking her time to reform?
Yes, we mentioned the 2 weeks.
Okay. Okay, okay. We already talked about the Jidaigeki, so
We
okay,
can
I think we're good.
mention the little bit that they had with the figurines that Steven had, which were clear references to other franchises. I believe it was Pikachu. I don't believe I identified the second one. A
I
very
didn't either.
a very poorly drawn Sonic, and Cloud from
Yeah,
Final Fantasy.
it's a very specific reference to this one drawing of Sonic. This one very poorly drawn Sonic saying "gotta go fast." That looks like it was scribbled by a 6-year-old. No offense.
Probably was, but yep, that was. There's not really much else to the what I'm saying, but it was a little fun to see that. Was there any other jokes I laughed at? Oh yes, there was the moment where when Pearl asked for participants to fight, Steven raised his hand and Garnet very silently put his hand down without saying anything. That was
That
really.
was a that was a really nice moment.
Yes, there were just a lot of nice moments where it felt like everyone. Yeah, I guess that is true. It felt like everyone was a family more so than kind of coworkers. That's Steven's moms that sometimes bicker among each other.
Yeah, this was actually one of the most solid episodes we've seen so far. I actually don't have many problems with it.
Yeah, and even like the negative in tone thing we talked about is more of a widespread thing with the animation industry anyway, and
It is
was
not exclusive to Steven Universe. Don't go attacking those people.
absolutely not. No, go attack me anyway for my. Okay, I can't finish that.
Don't.
I can't finish that sentence. um, yes, I think that's all we have today, right?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, that was today's episode, and look forward to episode 17 next time, everyone. Uh,
All right. Good night. Oh, by the way,
I. Oh yeah.
before we go, my Patreon is
Oh
probably
yes.
going to be linked. And I'm mentioning this because I brought it up today. If you want to financially support us, because the money is going to be 50-50 split with Jill, no matter what we do.
Yes.
It's https:// www.patreon.com/daft_starstruck.
Couldn't you just look up daft underscore starstruck on like Patreon itself and it'd show you that?
Sure.
I can also just link it in the YouTube or wherever we're going to be posting this
It,
description.
it's probably going to be posted to YouTube.
Yeah, good point. But you'll probably find it in the description as well. Uh, yeah, I guess we'll start linking that if we go through with this. And as usual, I'm Transpanda, currently Donna. You can find us at Transpanda Art on both Tumblr and Twitter.
Hi, I'm Alex. I gave you the patron.
All right.
Patreon patron.
Don't be patronizing to me, Alex.
I'm about to be patronizing on you.
Understandable. Have a good day. Thank you for
Have a great day, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Thank you for existing.
If I could begin to be half of what you think of me, I could do about anything. I could even learn how to love like you.